Okay, so today we have the shortest chapter in this book, not less important. Perhaps one they have a great deal of influence in our lives, in the modern society that you live. As a note, we will see that it is perhaps the only chapter that there is no instruction from the spirits. We have the passage of the gospel that is from the Gospel of Matthew, and then you have the commentaries of Kardec. And I think because if you understand the passage of the gospel in the Gospel of Matthew, of course, this is me thinking out loud here, the Spirit didn't even see the need of put their own input in this chapter, because the statement of Jesus is so complete that I think in here that the Spirit did not see a need to add anything to it, to explain anything to it, as long as we understand the statement of Jesus here. So perhaps we're going to spend more of the time, a good amount of time, trying to break down the teachings of Christ in this short passage of his gospel. We can start now.
Okay. Chapter 22. Do not separate what God has joined. The dissolubility of marriage, divorce. The dissolubility of marriage. Number one, the Pharisees also came to him in order to test him, saying to him, is it permitted for a man to divorce his wife for whatever reason? He responded to them, have you not read that he who created man at the beginning created them male and female? And that he said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined to his wife, and the two shall become one flesh only. Hence, they shall no longer be two, but one flesh only. Therefore, let no man separate what God has joined. They said to him, but then why did Moses command that the husband give his wife a letter of separation and divorce her? He responded to them, it was because of the hardness of your hearts that Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But in the beginning, it was not like that. I also declare to you that he who divorces his wife, except in the case of adultery, and marries,
another, commits adultery, and that he who marries the wife of another divorced also commits adultery. So that's for the chapter of Matthew, chapter 19, items that goes from 3 to 19. So let's break down this, and I have to say that I read quite a few things and I heard quite a few things in preparation for this. And what I'm bringing here is basically, I'm like a parrot, just passing along things that not a parrot, my interpretation of what I had read and heard on this topic, okay? So the Pharisees come to him and in order to test him, saying to him. So this tested him here is something that I never really liked the idea that every time that someone on the Pharisees tested Jesus, they comes with the word tested as defying or challenging him. And I have understood that very often this tested him really was to initiate a discussion, which was a common tradition among the scholars of that time, as it is a somewhat tradition among the Spiritism when they get together to discuss a topic. Each one has an opinion, and one will base the the argument on the books of the codification, on the books of Chico Xavier, of something that, but that has a basis, not only things that come to our own mind, which also may have its value, not because it comes from my mind, from your mind, that it carries no value, right? So I never really like the test that's being seen only as a challenge defying Jesus. And I have to understand there was a tradition of the discussion among the scholars to discuss the Torah. And I like to believe that this is one of the cases here. And what we see here from Jesus is he was a true doctor of the books of the Torah, of the scriptures, of the laws, and of the prophets. There is in the book of Brother X that's not translated, a passage when Mary is talking to her friend, I think it was Isabel, and Jesus was still a young child, I think 10 years old or so. And she was really concerned, really worried that Jesus would get in some serious trouble because as a young man, he would sit among the older doctors, the grown-up doctors, and really discuss with them, even kind of at times challenge what those adult doctors of the law were saying already. And very often the scholars would not have a proper answer to the challenges of Christ. And Mary was at a point kind of worried that this kid, man, he's pushing this envelope too hard. He's gonna get in trouble one of these days with those guys. Because naturally, at least we in the matters being the governor of the plan, he knew everything already, and perhaps he was one who sent all the others before him to come himself to prepare for his coming, right? And so the Pharisees, again, doctors of the laws of the time, and when the laws, the Torah, you mean primarily what was written by Moses. One thing that you can see here to begin with is that the question here is not if it's okay to divorce. Divorce was already established, was already law. The man could divorce his wife, not the other way around. Unfortunately, we are not going to open a discussion here for equalities, or we know there was not much equality, there is not much equality. We're not going to go into just social and injustice and injustice. We know there was not there and there is not here. Okay, otherwise we won't deviate so much to the topic and won't be able to really address what Kardec wants to bring to us. So divorce was already established. The man could divorce the wife. There was two main school of thoughts in the discussion of the Torah. There was the house of the Shammai and the house of Hillel. I don't know if I pronounce those names correctly. Okay, if anyone knows better can correct me here. And the house of Torah, the school of Shammai, would state that the woman could, or the man could only divorce their wife in a case of adultery. And you have to expand the word adultery, beyond just the extramarital affair. You have to expand the word adultery here as equal treason. And treason is a big word, but beyond just purely a physical extramarital affair here, right? Case of the woman prevent or inhibiting the man who practiced the law of Moses, to study the law of Moses. That would be considered treason. okay? And of course, naturally, the physical contact with another man, right? Which would allow the man to divorce their wife, but that was not even necessary because the woman would be stoned anyway. It was their law also, right? So we have really expanded the word adultery here beyond the extramarital affair, because that extramarital affair, the man would basically become a widow at that point, right? And there was the house of Hillel. The house of Hillel, or the philosophy or the interpretation of Torah, according to Hillel, was much more generous to the man. He said that the man could divorce his wife for any trivial offense, something as ridiculous as she's a bad cook, or she doesn't clean the house well, or she doesn't wash my clothes properly. Right? It was much more permissible for the man, for the husband, to divorce their wife. So in reality, what the Pharisees is what they're trying to get here, you see, where do you sit? Which school, which house do you follow? Can a man go ahead and divorce his wife for any reason, or has to be a very narrow offenses that would allow a husband to divorce his wife? and because the question is exactly that. Is it permit for a man to divorce his wife for whatever reason? So not to divorce his wife, but to divorce his wife for whatever reasons. Again, which school do you sit? Which side do you take in the discussion? And we know which side does Jesus take, right? It's the side of God. And to, as a scholar, as a doctor of the law, to defend his argument, just like us, when we sit over here, we use the books of Kardec, the complementary books. Jesus did the same thing. He used what he had. He used the Torah. And we notice here that not only he mentioned the Torah, but he used as it's written in the book and bring to us. And so Jesus responded, have you not read? So it is in the book. If you read, because it's in the book, right? Have you not read that he who created man at the beginning created then man and female, and that he said, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother and shall be joined by his wife, and the two shall become one only? Hence, they shall no longer be two, but one flesh only. Therefore, let no man separate what God has joined. Quotations of Genesis, right? If you go to the books, and we see in Genesis 1:27, it says over there. I mean, that I'm using the most common translation because I try to make it simple as possible, and says there in Genesis, and God created man, and God created humankind in the divine image, creating in the image of God, creating them man and female. And then again in Genesis 2:24, it says, therefore a man shall leave his father and mother and shall cleave into his wife, and they shall be one flesh. Now, we know that the custom then and now in that society and most society throughout the world is not, that's not the custom. The custom is the woman will leave her home, will leave her family, will join the husband's family in and very often in a kind of submissive position, which right in there, you see Jesus bring us back to the moral laws, to what is divine in nature as a marriage should be. Family, especially at that time, especially in that community, was extremely important for the man. So much so that very often the man would be recognized as son of, right? Throughout the Bible, you see that. You know, Elmo, son of Samuel. That's people would recognize people that, you know, that guy over there? Oh, yeah, that is João, son of Mr. Corngold, right? That's how important it is, which establishes something of material nature here. And Jesus brings us back to the true divine laws when, and quotating from the book that they read, the book that they follow. And the book says that the man will leave his family and will join a woman or to be his wife, and they will become one flesh. What is it that is capable of create such a strong bond that separates the man from the wife? It's not the essence of God love. It's God, it's Jesus bringing a lesson over here that says, it's already in your books. You guys already read it. You're just not following. Does it bring a bell to one of us? No, it's already there. The man shall live, his family, and join his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Therefore, let's not separate what God has united. Now, John in his gospel says God is love. So if God is love, then when you say let's not separate what God has united, equals let's not separate what love has united. So anything that is outside of this, what God equal what love has united, has the potential of not being indissoluble, that has the potential of being separated. Because the factor that Jesus used to tell us that cannot be separated is when this unity is created by love, equal, created by God. Then we cannot separate. And where does he find that? In the same book that the Pharisees was reading and was questioning Jesus. Okay? I'm going to open for questions soon, and I hope there is comments in there. But then he said, then the Pharisees continue trying to really expand on this topic, right? But then why did Moses command that the husband give his wife a letter of separation, divorce her? That is also in the book, right? That the divorce that was allowed by men was not only just, I don't like you anymore, or your food stinks, get out of here. No, there was a system, you know. The man would have to put in paper a letter of separation, which is a document, it's a public document that everyone would have access to it, that declares that this woman is not living in the house. This woman is, how can I put, legally free. So she could remarry, she could, you know, that she was not abandoned the husband, that the husband was just not abandoned his wife. There was a degree of account to the community. Yeah, a letter of separation. And although we understand very well that that's not what's practiced, the dowry, the marriage matrimonium or the marriage dowry that was given was actually to be used in case of a separation to be given back to the woman, because the family would give a dowry, right? To the husband or to the husband's family, I'm not sure, for that marriage. It was not just, I'm paying you to get rid of this woman of my life. In reality, the truth was this dowry is to be used in a case of a separation, something happened, to be given back to the woman so she could kind of reorganize her life, have something at least to start her life without that family, without that husband any longer. So when they say give back to, well, put something in a woman's hand, it's not that dowry. Give her some guarantee that should have something to survive, something to. There is a degree of humanity, at least, in that separation. It was not just the man has a right to kick the woman out of this. He had the right to do so, but he needs to conform with some norms, some laws of the law over there, right? And then Jesus responded, yes, Moses had to create this law of divorce, allow a man to divorce the woman, but Moses also took the care of giving a minimum of, at least, of protection, of guarantees to the woman who the husband would have separated. And why? Because Moses understands the hardness of our heart. And Jesus says over here, it was because of the hardness of our heart that Moses permitted you to divorce your wives. But in the beginning, it was not like that. It also declared to you that I also declare to you, I also declare to you that he who divorces his wife, except in the case of adultery, and marries another, commits adultery, and that he who marries his wife, that another man also commit adultery. So again, if the union is not based on the foundations of real love, it's not a union of God. Therefore, it has a potential of being separated, has the perhaps even the necessity of the reparation of a mistake. Because if you are not perfect beings, you don't make perfect decisions. If we make bad decisions that at one point you thought was the best, and later you recognize that was not a good idea, we should have the opportunity to repair that mistake. And if the mistake is a union, then the correction is a separation. Moses understood that, create the laws to protect the woman. But why? Because of the hardness of our heart, because places interests of purely material nature to interfere what should be a purely union based in love. It has and should be possible to divorce. You're gonna go see later here why it becomes so important for the church not allow divorce, or try to prevent divorce as much as it could for as long as it did. Any questions? Any comment?
I think that we need to go to go through the chapter to talk more about the Spiritist view and the present view on this. I think you covered well the historical aspect of it in terms of where they come from in the time of Jesus and the Jewish tradition.
Okay, so let's read then.
Okay. Number 2. There is nothing immutable except what has come from God. Everything that is the work of humans is subject to change. The laws of nature are the same at all times and in all countries. Human laws change according to time, place, and intelligent progress. In marriage, what is of divine order is the union of sexes to carry out the replacement of people who die. However, the conditions that govern this union are of an order that is so human that throughout the entire world, even throughout Christendom, there are no two countries where such conditions are completely the same, nor is there one where they have not undergone change over time. The result is that, in the eyes of civil law, what is legal in one country and at a given time is adulterous in another country and at a different time. This is because civil law is meant to regulate family interests, and these interests vary according to customs and local needs. Thus it is, for example, that in certain countries, only religious marriage is legal. In others, a civil marriage is also required. In others, finally, a civil marriage is enough by itself.
Okay, so here we go back to the essence that our essence is divine in nature, since we are sons and gods of one and only God, created by the one and of God, that is love, and according to John, therefore we are created from love, our sense is love, and that's common for every single spirit, incarnate and discarnate, of any and all different cultures, and any and all different cultures and religions, and everything that is related to our material life, the influences of topography, the influences of climate, where you create different necessities for different communities, for different peoples. You cannot assume someone who live in the plains of the sub-Saharan savanna, where you have the same culture, someone who lives in the top hills of the Himalayas, that you have the same kind of cultures and necessity, or someone who lives in the North Arctic. Only the climate or the topography generate different necessities that will generate different cultures and customs. Therefore, marriage is different. The necessities are different. The laws are different. But one thing is common. We are all have the same love. And a true marriage based on the same foundation, love, you'll be united perpetually, because love is perpetual. If there is the necessity, and there is a necessity, of formalizing that union in the civil matters, which is important. No one is going to say, oh, if it's done by love, then who cares? No, everybody should care. Okay, there are laws to regulate things, to make, to give protection, to give it, because again, being that we are not perfect, we make mistakes, there are laws, civil laws, that seeks to protect the individuals, very often, unfortunately, especially the woman, right? The same case of Moses with the dowry and that letter, right? That protects, that makes it more, that gives the both parts, but unfortunately, often, especially the woman, an opportunity to continue her life or their lives with some kind of dignity. And that will vary according to the custom, according to the laws of the land. But Fact is, whatever has foundation material means, eventually will break down. You know, it's a law in nature, it's Lavoisier law. So in nature, nothing is destroyed, everything is transformed. Everything, the buildings that we live right now, even the pyramids, with all the care they take, one day will go back to dust. So everything that is not of the divine in nature, eventually will end up, will get finished. How does that happen? It depends in case of marriage, according to the custom, according to the society. Okay.
Yeah, I think it's important here that we remember the basic concept of spirits, eternal spirits, right? So eternal spirits have no gender, have no sex. Of course, this was written at a time which, unions of the same sex were not recognized or accepted, and it's still in most of the world it isn't. But we need to remember, when Elmo mentioned love, we need to remember that the love between two spirits in the eternal sense can be manifested in different forms of existing conditions, the present incarnation. Okay, just a side note for us to, as we go through this chapter, to be more understanding of the concepts that Kardec is bringing here. Remember, Kardec went isolate himself to receive to write the gospel according to Spiritism. He went away from Paris. He went to a place, I don't remember exactly where, and with all the messages that he had received, and he organized and produced the gospel based on what he had at that time. So, when we talk about marriage, we have to take into consideration all different aspects of marriage that exist in society today and that will exist in society one day. As perfect spirits, of course, we wouldn't need anything civil, legal, because we will follow God's law. But until we are there, we need to have human laws to regulate the conditions. And as Elmo said, they vary from place to place. I remember watching a documentary in the jungle of Brazil that in a place that the woman had two husbands because they lived isolated, and for them to survive, they need two men to provide the necessities for all three of them to survive. So they would spend the whole day hunting and looking for food, and she would spend the whole day preparing the food and taking care of their hut that they lived. So, according to their needs. Is it immoral, illegal? No, it's according to their necessities. Okay.
Number 3. Nevertheless, in the union of the sexes, besides the divine physical law common to all living beings, there is another divine law, as immutable as all God's laws, and exclusively moral, the law of love. God has willed for individuals to be united not only through the ties of the flesh, but also through those of the soul, so that the mutual affection of the spouses is extended to their children, and that there should be two instead of one to love them, care for them, and enable them to progress. In the conventional conditions of marriage, is this law of love taken into consideration? Not in the least. The affection of two individuals attracted to one another by a mutual sentiment is not confirmed, and in the majority of cases, this affection is shattered for the sake of other interests. What is sought is not the satisfaction of the heart, but the satisfaction of pride, vanity, it's not moving,
And cupidity. In
And-
short, the satisfaction of our interests of a material nature, when everything
It's not moving.
is well according to such interests.
Okay.
The marriage is said to be suitable.
And material assets are well matched. It is said that the spouses are also suited for each other and ought to be very happy. However, neither civil law nor the commitments that it contracts can replace the law of love if it does not preside over the union. The result is that what has been joined forcibly separates on its own, that the oaths sworn at the altar become perjury if they are pronounced as a banal formula. As a consequence, they are the unhappy unions that end up becoming criminal, a double disgrace that could be avoided if within the marriage the only law that sanctions it in God's eyes were not left out, the law of love. When God stated, the two shall become one flesh only, and when Jesus says, let no man separate what God has joined, one must understand the union according to the immutable law of God and not according to the changeable law of human beings.
So it seems to me that Kardec is saying thing. We are going to separate marriage. What is Jesus is referring, something that is united by God and therefore should not be separated from unions that are based in other kinds of necessities, including reproduction, okay, that may not necessarily have this foundation in love as it should be, but not necessarily evil also. As John has just mentioned, one woman, two husbands, according to necessities. Doesn't mean that they are committed a sin, committed a divine crime. Not at all. That is the necessity of reproduction. That is the necessity to grow up and multiply ourselves. I don't know how that statement is in English, but it comes from Christ as well. That is the necessity for protection. The necessity of there is strength in number. Okay, there is the instinct of preservation of our own genetic pool, and depending on where we live, to guarantee the perpetuation of that genetic pool, we're gonna have to make many babies because many of them will die. You don't know how many will survive. So there is many factors in our lives, in our physical existence, that may promote some unions that are not true marriage. And therefore, the potential separation is real. Does it need to be separated? No. Can it be transformed eventually in a true marriage? Yes, there's all the potential of that. What starts as a union for necessity become a true marriage based on love. It's possible. So there is many factors that creates a union that is not a true marriage, okay? And once those necessities are resolved, then there's nothing that united that couple anymore. If a couple get united just through the physical beauty at the early 20s, by the 60s, and that beauty is not really there anymore. So if the whole thing was based purely on a physical appearance, what's going to happen when the physical appearance is not all that great anymore? There's nothing unite them anymore. Should we just go ahead and separate, or perhaps continue with the same harmonious relationship. Each one decides for themselves. And again, everything is from Jesus based on the Torah. So when he mentions Genesis 27, right? And God created humankind in the divine image, created in the image of God, creating them man, male and female. Of course, some translation says man and woman. Telling over here, the man and woman are equal. Right here in this subject, they're equal. It's interesting how wonderful, I think it's wonderful that the Genesis contradicts itself, because it's a book of moral values. It's not a book of history. It's not a book of anthropology, right? Because later on it says that the woman was created from the ribs of Adam, and that story, which there's nothing wrong, because what we have to collect is the moral lessons. And it's a beautiful, perfect parable. I love the Genesis because of it. Of course, it cannot be used as a textbook in biology, it cannot be used as a textbook in anthropology, right? It cannot be used as a textbook in geology. Fortunately, many people use that. But as all the scriptures, a book of moral values using parables, Genesis is perhaps the greatest of the parables. And also Genesis, I think it's 5:2. I wrote over here. It's repeated, man and female, he created them. And he blessed them and named them mankind when they were created. And this mankind, in different translation, it says man, it says Adams. I choose mankind, of course, to establish over here that man and woman are one and only. And when they're united on the basis of God, the basis of love, that union cannot be separated. But not cannot be separated because nobody can interfere it. It's because the union is so powerful that no one will want to do so. If you have a union with your spouse that is based in true love, you're going to go to all the hardships. You're going to go all the problems that you're going to face together. You're going to tolerate all the things about him or her that you dislike, that you would love him to change. But that foundation, love, will keep both of you united. Even if you have to struggle, even if it's going to be difficult, that strong foundation will lead you to say, no, I have to stay here together. It is more important to me. Okay? Not say over here that I want to be submitted to abuse, to violence, to crimes committed by another part. Okay, we're not talking about that here. First of all, we have to follow the laws of the land. When it comes to no one should commit a crime against anyone. Violence is a crime. Okay, I'm gonna make that statement right here. Not gonna even put that into discussion. But there are other things that one side will have to kind of tolerate, have greater patience, have greater tolerance. And why you do all that? Because you have that strong foundation, that's love. Not because of our interest, not because then I have to do this or they have to get another job. No, I'm talking about that. The foundations of love will make you persist in that union because you know it's perpetual as you yourself and the other side, him or herself as well. So what has been joined forcibly separates its own. I love the statement. What has been joined forcibly separate its own. So again, if it wasn't united just by true physical good looking, that physical good looking is gonna go somewhere, and then separation gonna happen on its own. it may separate, as it's one in a legal divorce, so it separates its own in what we hear very often. We are separated but living together, but the separation is already established. They just kind of stay together because it's easier this way. Okay. Number 4.
Before. It's not moving.
I think it's your computer that's slow, Soraya, because I changed it.
Oh, I
Um,
can get it now.
yeah, go ahead.
I don't have it yet.
No. Is the civil law then superfluous, and should we return to marriages according to nature? Certainly not.
Okay, I got it now, John.
Okay.
The civil law is meant to regulate social relationships and family interests in accordance with the requirements of civilization. This is why it is useful and necessary, but viable. It must be provident because civilized human beings cannot live like primitives, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prevents it from being a corollary of the divine law. Obstacles to the fulfillment of the divine law arise from social prejudices and not from the civil law. These prejudices, although still alive, have already lost much of their influence among enlightened cultures, and they will disappear altogether with moral progress, which will finally open people's eyes to countless ills, wrongs, and crimes that result from unions entered into solely out of material interests. Someday we will ask ourselves if it is more humane and more charitable, moral
to change one another, two individuals who cannot live together, than to restore them their freedom, or if the perspective of an indissoluble chain does not increase the number of irregular unions.
Okay.
So I think once we grasp what Jesus says regarding divorce in his discussion with the Pharisees, if you understand his answers based on what he brings from the Torah, what he brings from the divine laws in essence, understand that he told us that he have not come to contradict the laws, but to reinforce them. And we understand here he is making a reference to the laws of divine nature, the natural laws, the divine laws, the laws of God, the laws that we study in our Spirit's book, and have very often, I'm not going to say contradicted, but made a very clear differentiator of the laws that have a divine in nature that comes from God, from the human-made laws, the necessary laws that one time was necessary, but understand that if it's not divine in nature, then it's human, and human being not perfect, human being able to commit mistakes. Those laws made by human are not perfect, may be a mistake, or even if it was absolutely appropriate and necessary at one time, since there is a law of progress. As we progress, those laws no longer carry its value, its importance, or those laws need to be readjusted to accompany humans with spiritual progress, moral and intellectual. They know the teachings of Christ. It makes that separation, right? When it says, my Father works every day, and so do I, a reference that it's possible and it's okay to work on the Sabbath. That one time it was necessary to eliminate to be forceful, that one day you have to devote yourself to worship because of our ignorance. So now you understand that you can worship every day, everywhere, and anywhere at any time. We don't have to take a time to do bowels and reads and eat special food and this and that. That the act of worship is to fulfill God's laws. That one time was necessary to prohibit people to eat contaminated meat. So they could not eat pork, because invariably the pork would be contaminated by us to begin with. We contaminate them, and then we them and get sick from what we created ourselves. But now with the proper understand of microbiology, proper understand of how to raise certain species that we culture, it is. There's no crime and divine crime in eating some kind of meat that at one time would be a big problem, create epidemics. And when you are living the Egyptians and going to the promised land with a group of people with not much means of treatment, we have to be forceful to avoid epidemics, because you could kill everyone over there. We just went through a pandemic. We know what I mean about that. So I had to be forceful. We created laws was necessary at that time, but need to be reevaluated, readjusted to the new times that we live. But the ones were of divine nature, but perfect, because created by a perfect being. Therefore, will and shall never be changed, just being followed, because it was created for our happiness. Right?
A reminder that Moses have more than 600 commandments, and we have the 10 commandments that come from God, that come from superior spirits. But all the other commandments, Moses had to say that he came from God, because for people to accept. Because if he said, "Oh, that's my regulation," he could be challenged. But once he says it comes from God, everyone has to accept. That's why he did what he did, saying that the prohibition to eat pork or other things all came from God. So people would accept without discuss.
Yeah, so when Kardec puts the question for him to answer himself, of course, is the civil laws then superfluous, and should we return to marriage according to nature? So absolutely not. There is, I just said, there is a law of progress. We are progressing. We should move forward. Our society is progressing, and the laws needs to reflect our moral and our intellectual progress. The laws should be always moving with our moral and intellectual progress. And when they don't, it probably, and this is me saying, it reflects that we have not really reached that moral and intellectual progress as a community, as a society. You may have one or another individual, a small part, that have moved ahead, and are perhaps fighting and trying to push us together by trying to implement or improve the laws of the community. Usually those individuals will be cast aside, will not be really understood, because we, proud of all ignorant individuals, when we do not understand something of a higher level of intellectual, we tend to hold them as being the wrong ones, and we in our ignorance being the right ones, right? So what Kardec is saying here is, no, we need civil regulations, regulators, because of the hardness of our heart, as Jesus said, because those unions may have the potential of not being united for the most righteous aspect of it, you may need some kind of regulation that provides protection to families, the integrity of the family. And to return to nature as some ideologists have come, it would be a retrograde, it would be moving backwards. So you see that most of the more evolved societies have like regulations, have means to establish as much as possible protection, equality, justice. And you can only do that in nowadays with civil laws. As João has said, once you perform perfectly the spirit, you're not going to need any laws because you're going to live in accordance with the divine laws. We're not there yet. We do not comprehend them completely yet. So we have to do our best with a good intention always, of course, to have civil regulations, civil laws to the common good. And when he speaks about prejudices, I think it's important to comment here. It must be provident because civilized human beings cannot live like primitives, but nothing, absolutely nothing, prevents it from being a corollary of the divine law. Although we have to create our own laws, there is nothing that prevents us to make our rules and laws as comparable as possible, as equal as possible to the divine laws. Actually, to me, that's what means progress, moral and intellectual. And the important obstacles, the fulfillment of the divine laws arise from social prejudices and not from the civil law. So what really, what Kardec says, very often the laws are okay, but what really interferes is our prejudice, is the hardness of our heart again, the social prejudices, the prejudices of social class, the prejudices of skin color, the prejudices of religion. I was just listening the other day of a woman, I'm not gonna say the name, in my face, how much she suffered, or their relationship suffered because being Catholic, fall in love with a Jewish man, and they get married, and how that woman herself have absolutely lost contact with the whole her Catholic family, who completely divorced her, does not allow her to have contact with anyone of that family because she married a Jewish man. And although in the beginning she had problems with his Jewish family, the Jewish family absolutely later took her into the household, and she becomes a part of the family without any problems. We see here those prejudices, and it's very sad that it comes especially from so-called Christians. Right? I say so-called Christians because you may carry whatever label that you choose to put in your forehead as being Spiritist, or Catholic, or Protestant, Baptist, Presbyterian, whatever label you put in your forehead and you say you are this or that, but you feel completely follow or live your life in completely discord with the teachings of Christ. What kind of Christian are you? Right? And it is exactly those prejudices, those problems that separates us from the divine laws and creates the necessities of eventually a separation. If those were united through prejudice, the same way that people are not united through prejudices. Now the Jewish cannot marry the Catholic, all right? the same way some marriage are forced upon because of those prejudices. I don't care if you love him, but his color is too dark for you to marry. You cannot marry. You can marry that one on the other side who has a light color skin. That's one that you must marry. But you cannot marry that one because you won't be able to give you the same status quo in financial possibilities that you have right now. You have to choose one who can match up with our financial possibilities. All those prejudices also force in many situations unions that, again, if it's based on material things, everything's that material has an end and will be finished at one point or another. And I think the remark of Kardec is extremely important, letting us know that the problem that we have here is really based on prejudices, and the prejudices that are based on two major things in our lives: selfishness and pride. That generates all that prejudice, that generates all those unions that are forced and not based on love. All right?
Number 5, divorce. Divorce is a human law with the purpose of legally separating what is already separated. In fact, it is not contrary to God's law, since it merely reforms what humans have stipulated, and is applicable only in cases in which a divine law has not been taken into account. If it were contrary to the divine law, the church itself would have to consider as transgressors those of its leaders, who by their own authority and in the name of religion have imposed divorce on more than one occasion. A double transgression, therefore, since it is practiced only with the material interest in mind and not to satisfy the law of love. However, Jesus himself did not consecrate the absolute indissolubility of marriage. Did he not say it was because of the hardness of your hearts that Moses permitted you to divorce your wives? This means that since the time of Moses, separation might have been necessary when mutual affection was no longer the sole objective of marriage. Jesus adds, however, but in the beginning it was not like that, which means that at the origin of humankind, when people were not yet perverted by selfishness and pride, but lived according to the law, God's law, unions were based on reciprocal sympathy and not on vanity or ambition. Thus, there was no room for divorce. Jesus goes even further and specifies the case in which divorce can have a place: adultery. Now, there is no adultery where sincere mutual affection reigns. It is true that he prohibits any man from marrying a divorced woman, but one
must keep in mind the customs and character of the people in those times. In cases of adultery, the Mosaic law prescribed stoning.
Jesus wanted to abolish a barbaric custom, hence a penalty was needed, and he found it in the disgrace attached to the prohibition of a second marriage. It was in some ways one civil law replacing another civil law, but which, like all laws of such nature, had to endure the test of time.
Thank you. So, it already established that divorce was already allowed at the time of Moses. That Moses understood the hardness of our heart, that Moses understanding that in order to protect or in order to give some dignity and possibility to continue a life of a woman, it was necessary to create laws and establish rules of when a man would separate the wife. That would happen regardless of the laws. So Moses was intelligent and good enough to provide some kind of regulation to those divorces, right? The paper, the return of the dowry, providing some dignity to the woman. But when would the divorce happen? Or why in this case, right? Because of the hardness of our heart. Which stated that the divorce is a necessary remedy to repair something that you start wrong and would have to have an end. The church, we need to remember here historically, by the 1200, 1300, the church became the state, basically, right? It was all the social regulations or the social rules was done by the church. The church became an extremely strong, powerful institution who dictated just about everything. And the church is one who would make the marriages, the one who united two individuals. But very often we know here historically that the intention of the union of the two individuals was the least of it. The interest much greater was the union of families, was the union of, in some case, kingdoms. There was the union of feudal systems, right? In the terms of feudalism, when you unite two families or two castes through marriage, then you unite two powerful communities into one, become even more powerful. In a time there was, continuous battles between clans and families and feudal statements here and there. The church was not only unite two individuals. The church was uniting powers, was creating small countries almost, we could say here, right? So it became very important to that institution, that political institution that the church had become, to regulate things very strong. Now, if I unite those two clans, those two empires, so to say, for my own interest, I want to make sure that they will not break apart, they will stay together. And then it's wise to create that dogma that you cannot separate. And based in what? Based in what little piece of the scriptures that says, do not separate what God united. That was what it takes, that little piece. The whole thing that you read here of Matthew, the whole statements of Jesus going back to Genesis, means nothing or meant nothing. The whole decision of making divorce impossible by the church was based in that statement, or that little piece of the sentence. Do not separate what God has united. For political social interest. Okay? Now, as Kardec says over here, paradoxically, the church had the right of create some divorces. The church have the act to go above God according to them, because you cannot separate what God has united, except that the church could be above God and create some separations in accordance to their own political, social interests. Now, this is history, okay? You can go to the history books, you can see many cases of that. Kardec's mentioned here history. Not an accusation of anything. It's was us there. Again, it was us then there. Okay? Which make it the possibility of a reparation of a mistake basically impossible. Which actually makes that very author's unions the least participant in the unit was the husband of themselves. They are almost like instruments at the hands of clans, at the hand of empires, at the hand of the church, to unite or separate according to their own interest. It has nothing to do with God. It has nothing to do with love. And it will take a long time, immense moral progress, intellectual also, for us to reach of the level of the was allowed in above the church in civil conquests to divorce would be a possibility. I think Brazil was only in 75, something very late already, that Brazil allowed the divorce. I don't know when divorce was allowed here in this country, if it was ever totally prohibited. I don't even know the history of divorce in this country. But for many time, for many years, for centuries, when the church was in the stronghold of the political affairs, it used that simple statement, that little piece. You cannot separate what God has united. Completely ignoring the whole thing. And for this reason, we didn't have divorce for legally in many countries, especially those who had some association with the church. It was very, very hard for the society to separate themselves from the stronghold of the church and allow the divorce to take place. And
a whole new religion was created on the basis of divorce, right? The Church of England, Henry VIII, separated from the church because the church didn't allow him to divorce, and he created a new religion, which is has some characteristics of Catholic Church and some characteristics of the Protestant religion. It's a mixture of those.
Yeah, which proves that there was the possibility, because he went to the Pope and presented his argument. There is no big historical thing, and the church refused because it was not for their interest at that time to allow that separation to take place. And then to the aspect of adultery, we see here how progress is slow, and we really have to meet the laws in accordance to the rudeness, to the ignorance of the people of that land. And as I said, divorce is going to happen anyway. If the truth is, men with the control of the things at that time, you'd create tremendous amount of injustice to women if there was no kind of regulations to those separations, right? Because of the hardness of our heart, there would be a lot of more transgression to natural laws if Moses did not implement some kind of man-made Moses laws, again, to give some dignity to marriage. And you have to bring the word adultery beyond the extramarital affair, because the extramarital affair would almost, if caught, almost a life sentence. So the woman would be stoned in the corner. And Jesus brought back this aspect. You have, of course, the adultery woman case when he wrote things on the sand, and according to psychographers, I believe, I don't remember the spirit, was Brother X. Well, I don't remember exactly. At that, what Jesus was writing on the sand at the time was as going around and write different types of sins that we commit and kind of question, you who are without sin, throw the first stone, and start writing different kind of sins on the sand. And the elders, especially the elders, because the elder was the first one to leave, if you record, see those sins written over there and say, yeah, I cannot be the first one to throw that stone. And each one start leaving slowly. Wasn't a way to protect, to eliminate that law that permitted man to stone a woman, bringing levels, steps of a moral advancement to us. No divorce was allowed because it was necessary, because the hardness of our heart. Stone the woman was allowed because of the hardness of our heart. Jesus brings new paradigm. You cannot do that because you are yourself guilt, and that there is a need of forgiveness, a new paradigm. And as we continue to evolve, there is the church lost its political power, most of the places, which allow us to make repair when we recognize that we have made a mistake. Nowadays, to go on, to continue to make those mistakes, to continue to make those unions based on futile reasons, will eventually lead to disharmony that the divorce may become necessary. But again, when it's based on true love, the individual will be able to overcome most of the struggles and difficulties when the foundation is strong. And again, I have to reinforce here, no one here suggests that anyone, man and woman, should tolerate physical abuse, should go against even the human laws that says the violence is a crime, and not only physical, but also verbal, emotional violence. No one believing that God is love, that God wants the best for us, should tolerate, should be live being abused, being violated physically, verbally, emotionally. I'm not going to go to the next chapter in reality because I did not prepare for it. So I hope you guys have some questions for us, or comments, or argument.
Yes, Wayne.
Yesterday was my wife and I, our 45th anniversary. And after so many years, you realize how the decision you made, we made 45 years ago, would have on our lives. It was you have physical attractions, you have the affinity of thoughts and the way you think, and the cultures of the family that we wanted to be part of. And you think how fortunate you are to go such a distance. it's really a very important decision made by very young people. And reading this, it dowry, dowry went both ways, during and historically, give it to the bride's family, give it to the husband's the husband, and there are a lot of things here that make you reflect on life and marriage. Just thinking about the divorce side makes you think about the marriage side.
Yes, totally agree. The only personal thing problem that I have with divorces in our society today is it seems to have become the first alternative. At the first time you face a little problem in the relationship, and if even as a young couple individuals you make those decisions, if you do not understand that there will be arguments, there will be some ups and downs in that relationship. There is three entities in there. Actually, there is him, there is her, and there is the unit itself. There is an entity in itself, and that entity will go to, some rough times, time and time. The divorce should be the last option, not the first option. I think divorce absolutely is a necessity in our society as the last option. Because you are celebrating 45 years, I'm celebrating 30 years, and the only way that you are able to come here today and talk about 45 years is because you left that option as the last one, if ever comes to anyone's mind, that there is solution for the little problems, that they can be resolved, and the most important thing is the strength of that third entity. And you work to make the strength of that third entity, being the relationship in itself, should be always a common goal of the other two parts, him and her. If you are able to do that, there will be a lot less divorce, there will be a lot more happiness, and people would come many years later say, yeah, we were able to overcome this and this and that because of moral values that we had at that time when those problems arise. We're able to find the strengthen the foundation, and that foundation is love. That foundation is God, because God is love.
Yeah, congratulations, Wayne, first of all. And yes, I agree with Elmo. 50% of marriages today end up in divorce. That's here in the US statistics. This is clear, a number that...
And I believe in the first year, it's really troubling.
Yeah, and it's really, it's really a demonstration of our materiality in terms of how we see life, right? We focus on the here and the now, and but we have to understand we are imperfect spirits, so we make mistakes. And again, some marriages are huge mistakes. So separation is necessary, because it can, you need to avoid things getting worse, in the sense of compromising your moral and intellectual evolution. And if the marriage is causing problems that are not cannot be resolved, then you have to move on. Because again, according to Spiritism, if you come here, you have a plan, and this plan includes the person you are going to be associated with, or out of readjustment, or out of love to continue progressing. And this readjustment, sometimes you have to spend some years with them and it's over. So we have to be open-minded that different necessities for different couples. But definitely, I fully agree that nowadays people are taking the easy way out very easily, very quickly, and that's not the best path, because what you are doing is just postponing the problem for later in this incarnation or the next incarnation. And when you see people getting married 4 or 5 times, I normally say, the problem is the person that is getting married 4 or 5 times. It's not the partner, right? Because the person cannot find it oneself, and that's why they keep jumping ship from one to another. But there are couples that are on the second marriage and extremely happy and extremely with extremely blissful union. So, and again, we make mistakes. We can try again and find happiness in the second try or third try. It's just we need to be only conscious of what we are doing. Try to be conscious on what we're doing.
And this thing is so important that even at times of Moses had that already what is the word? He has a note on the laws that said that, that okay, you can divorce your wife, but think well, because if you divorce your wife goes out, gets together with someone, that someone separates her, and now she's free on the market again, so to say, you cannot remarry her. So think well, you can divorce, but there is some rules over here. If you met her, so to say, fall in love with her, it was your decision, you get together now, because of a little problem along the road, a little bump, you choose to divorce her, you think well, because you cannot go back to her again. I don't think we're done over here. So Ron has any
Well, next Sunday is the first Sunday of the month, so we are going to go back to Between Heaven and Earth that we started last month. We are going to start on chapter 3. On this book, chapters are small, so we may do 2 or 3 chapters per month, but according to our needs. Okay. I think that's it. Carol, can you do our final prayer? Carol, you're there?
Sorry, my computer is messed up today. Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Elmo, John, and Sarita for reading, and everyone who has been participating today. Infinite Creator, Supreme Intelligence, and Divine Providence, we give thanks for the opportunity to be together today for our studies of the Gospel according to Spiritism, regarding chapter 22, divorce and marriage. We are eternal spirits, and love can occur in expanded ways in various cultures. There are historical and modern human perspectives regarding marriage and divorce according to the times and according to various societies. Civil, religious, and social laws can vary with divine laws. Divine laws unite the flesh and the soul. Divorce is a human law that legally separates a marriage agreement. Historically, the church, capital C, was an authority and arbiter of divorce. May marriage have the foundation of love and respect as we go forward in our evolution. We give thanks to the spiritual benefactors, the good spirits, for guiding and inspiring us. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us. And for our loved ones, our directors, our counselors, the mediums, and workers. We pray for inner peace, and especially for world peace, and for those who are suffering in the physical and spiritual worlds. We pray for SGNY and all Spiritist centers throughout the world, that they may grow, they may expand, prosper, and be protected. As we close today, we humbly ask for safety and protection as we return to family, friends, loved ones, and coworkers. Excuse me. May we receive the love, light, and peace of Christ within us, and may we go forth as beacons of light, of love, peace, and of charity and service. So be it.